Well, the New South Wales government is under pressure to ease lockout laws to boost Sydney's nighttime economy. The Joint Select Committee holds its first public hearing today to discuss submissions for and against relaxing current lockout laws. New South Wales One Nation leader Mark Latham is part of the committee, and he joins me now. Mark Latham, good morning to you. So should these lockout laws be rolled back?
Yes, they should be. The data that's come into the committee is a stunning rebuke of the effectiveness of the nanny state and excessive government regulation. This whole concept of locking the public out of the nighttime economy started in Newcastle in 2007 and came to Sydney, as we know, in 2015. But the data from the New South Wales crime statistician shows that non-domestic alcohol-related assaults have come down faster in other parts of the state than Newcastle and Sydney, places that have had these lockout restrictions. So for no gain, apparently, relative to the rest of the state in terms of assaults and violence, we've destroyed jobs, investment, economic opportunity, Sydney's international tourism reputation, and a good part of the opportunities much needed in Newcastle for employment generation. So this has been a public policy disaster, unsupported by the evidence, and the committee starts its hearings today, and obviously we'll hear more of the evidence to show that the lockout laws compared to other parts of New South Wales have been ineffective.
So in your view, what should be the new times?
Well, there's an argument to get rid of the entire apparatus because if you look at areas in Sydney near where I live, Campbelltown, Penrith, Parramatta, the rate of these assaults has come down, and you'd have to say that the big driver of change has been a new social attitude, that fight culture is unacceptable. Young people know that binge drinking is not advisable. Social attitudes have changed, and you can have all the nanny state restrictions under the sun, but you can't beat human nature. If people are responding in a positive way for common sense, responsible drinking and behaviour, that's a very good thing that should be applauded. My own assessment in Sydney is that last drinks at 4 o'clock, close the venues at 5 a.m, but there's also an argument to say just hand it over to the licensing authorities and get the same beneficial outcomes that we're getting in other parts of the state in terms of social behaviour without destroying jobs and investment. You know, Sydney, the centre of Sydney has become a mausoleum. And Peter, when you look at all the public investment, billions of dollars over hundreds of years in the centre of Sydney set up for people to enjoy themselves, what a terrible waste. What a terrible waste.
So what are people, I mean, you've been out there as part of this committee, you've been talking to them. What are some of the solutions that have been canvassed? Should it just be, you know, like you said, open up until 4 or 5 in the morning or even beyond that?
Well, you need some responsible closing time. I'm not a big rap on people wandering out of venues and the sun's come up. You can get all your fun and activities done by 5 a.m. surely. But, you know, the evidence overwhelmingly has been about restrictions that are quite embarrassing. You know, we spoke to the king of Sydney nighttime venues, Justin Hemmes, who said that he had a circumstance where Madonna, the great internationally famous Madonna, had finished a show in Sydney and couldn't get into his venue at 1:35 a.m. Now, 5 minutes after the lockout. So, you know, how embarrassing. So when it gets to that level of embarrassment and all the jobs, investment, the nighttime economy opportunities that have been lost, you know, walk through Darlinghurst now, once such a vibrant area. It's like a funeral parlour there, all closed down at night. It's a tragedy what's happened, and you know, the government here went way overboard with this, and the figures show that it's had no gain, particular lockout laws. So let's enjoy the improvement in social behaviour and social attitudes about excessive drinking and get the jobs, the investment and the tourism reputation back into Sydney and also Newcastle.
Well, I think one of the stats that I read on the weekend is that New South Wales is missing out on about $16 billion worth of revenue because of this. But Mark Latham, just before you go, another issue that's bubbling along this week in the New South Wales government is the abortion bill that will be debated. Do you support it or do you oppose it?
Well, Peter, what I want is for the upper house to play its proper role as a house of review. The government lost control at the last election. There's been a lot of noise in our chamber, I think beneficial, positive noise, that we should be exercising proper review. There's two massively contentious issues, I think flaws in the bill regarding late-term abortion and also religious freedom of doctors. And it would be advisable for the Berejiklian and Greenwich government to slow down. Don't think you could ever jam this through in a couple of days and have a committee inquiry and proper review Most notably, what's the Morrison government doing on religious freedom for doctors? We could be back in 6 months' time because of the passage of Commonwealth legislation which would override our rules. So there's no need for a rush. This wasn't a hot-button issue out there in the election campaign or since, and politicians have put it in, mainly their own ideology and worldview. But now the public knows about it. All the feedback I had over the weekend was, in particular, public hostility to the way this is handling late-term abortions, and they're out of step with community opinion in that regard, so all the more reason for the Legislative Council to play the proper role of House of Review. Well,
just to be clear, though, do you support it or do you oppose it?
Well, what are we voting on? I'm certainly not supporting the bill as it stands, and I want to see amendments proposed and examined with regard to religious freedom and the problem with the late-term abortion. So I wouldn't be supporting the Berejiklian and Greenwich plan to ram it through, as is in a couple of days of debate, but I'm open to looking at amendments as the upper house reviews what is at the moment flawed legislation.
So at the moment, if that vote came to you, you'd block it?
Well, I want to see what happens out of the review process. My election stance was I didn't see the need for a change because the public weren't talking about it. Politics is at its weakest when it's self-indulgent MPs putting something through that where the public had, 500 other priorities. But I'm particularly concerned. I couldn't be supporting something that overrides the religious freedom of doctors, Christian, Islamic, Hindu doctors who would be compelled against their moral code to participate in this legislation when obviously that's unacceptable.
Yeah, well, in an interview in 2004, you mentioned that these sorts of issues should be a conversation between a woman and her doctor, that politics should be left right out of this. Has your stance changed on that?
Well, the doctor rules have changed, haven't they? I'm not for compelling Christian, Islamic, Hindu doctors to break their religious beliefs and participate in something that they regard as morally wrong. I fundamentally believe that when we compel people, when government compels people to do things they regard to be morally wrong, we move one step closer to a police state. So I won't be supporting that. I won't be supporting that at all, and I wouldn't expect religious doctors would be supporting it.
All right, plenty going on in New South Wales government this week. Mark Latham, thank you very much for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
A pleasure.